everyone, and welcome to our Unit 2 public speaking lecture, video, whatever it might be. I'm Mr. Wrighthouse. I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to talk about narratives in public speaking. So we're going to talk about what a narrative is, why we might include it in a speech or in a situation where we are speaking to a group of people, why it might be useful, what objectives you would have with it, and then how to do it effectively. I'll also go over the any assignments or grades you're going to have in this unit so that you'll know them going in. So Margaret Atwood is the author of The Handmaid's Tale, among other books and stories and poems and things. She is a very prolific Canadian writer, and she said, "You're never going to kill storytelling because it's built in the human plan. We come with it. Our brains like stories, okay? Plain and simple. Our brains like um, being able to um, follow along a story. We like a beginning, middle, and end. We like resolution. Some of us like conflict more than others in a story. My daughter can't she can't deal with too much conflict in a story. She's in that age where she can't quite deal. So she if a story is kind of getting into that kind of climax part, she kind of starts to get a little nervous and she wants to change. But we've worked on telling her this is part of storytelling. Stories have conflict, then stories have resolution. It is just kind of part of everything. So Atwood's correct. It is part of the human plan. It's part of our DNA to tell stories. Narratives can be fictional, they can be historical, they can be hypothetical, they can be personal, and they can be interactive. They usually are. And what I mean by this is you can obviously tell a fictional story in a public speaking context. That's really easy. You can also tell a historical anecdote or a historical narrative to help prove a point, a hypothetical, a what if, something that maybe didn't happen but could happen, right? You can tell a personal story. Those are obviously like the one I just told about Nora, my daughter. Those are obviously the ones that are most effective. And then interactive. When we're telling a story in a public speaking context, and we are really diving into the story, right? We're spending a couple minutes on it. Very often, the audience becomes more engaged with you because they want to see where the track of the story is going to end. So that's where narratives and using them in public speaking can be hugely, hugely beneficial to you and interactive. So you're in an English class. You've had English classes before. None of this is new. None of this is new information. Narrative elements that we need to make sure that we cover. Plot. Y'all have been covering the witch's hat plot diagram since you were fetuses. This is nothing earth-shatteringly new, but it's important to know that stories do need to have beginning, middle, and end to them when we talk about them. So often I have had, even in just like dinner party scenarios, right? Someone starts to tell a story and then they realize the story's too long. They maybe forgot their point. Maybe something embarrassing is about to happen in the story and they need to pivot away. And then they just sort of let the story fade. And it's like, but why did you say that? Like, what was the point? So we need to make sure we have a plot, a beginning, middle, and end. And so often when we are talking about ourselves, a story that might be interesting to us, we know the ending. Maybe it doesn't always translate. So we have to make sure we keep that in mind. Character, even if it's a hypothetical, even if it's a historical, you need to make sure that you have someone for the audience to latch onto, even if it's yourself. Theme. I have always thought the theme as the lesson that the author wants you to kind of take away from this piece. Sorry, I'm turning my hand warmer on because my hands are cold. I have this hand warmer here. Is it turning on now? Yes. Okay. So my hands will be warm in un momento. So what's the theme, right? What's the lesson that the author wants you to come away with? And then relevance. Why are you telling this story in this context right now? How do we use narrative? What are the different ways that we can use narrative? Because again, we're going to talk in this course about all the different tools you have in your toolbox, all the plays in the playbook on how to prove a point and talk to an audience. You don't have to use everything every time. Not every coach uses every play in the playbook, right? I think. I'm not an Last time I checked, I'm not an NFL coach, so I don't really know. I'd have to ask one sometime, but my guess is that they don't. Um, you can explain or describe something. A narrative can often be used to elaborate on something that maybe needs more illustration. We can use narratives to persuade. We're going to talk about examples of that. The best way to use a narrative is to keep it brief, again, like 2 minutes, depending on how long your speech actually is, to keep it relevant, right? Make sure it matters to the grand overall context of the speech, and to keep it in perspective. Make sure that it's not too long, too short, and make sure it flows as part of the bigger thing that you're trying to accomplish. There are levels of formality with any public speaking, um, any speech that you're going to make, or anything honestly that you write down. From informal phone messages and texts to very formal business letters and legal documents. You will know, you will be able to tell or ask somebody, how formal are we talking here? Now, for me in class, I'm the only one seeing your speeches that you're going to make. So it can be conversational to formal. If it was informal and you you started your video and you're like, yeah, I don't know, like, I am supposed to do a speech or whatever, so, like, I guess, I don't know, like, I'm gonna, like, that's too informal. But it doesn't have to be, "Dear sir, thank you for listening to my speech today." We don't have to do that either. We can be somewhere in this formal to conversational tone, depending on the speech, depending on what I'm asking for, in any given unit. But make sure that you know that level of formality going in, so that you know kind of what is expected of you. If you are going to use a conversational style, again, y'all and I, I'm kind of using a conversational style right now. I'm having a conversation with you that you can't respond to, right? I'm paying attention to the words that I use. I'm not going super informal. Um, but I am paying attention to the words that I'm using to you. I'm not getting too crazy. I am being very relaxed with it. Again, I've had a lot of practice public speaking, so you know. Um, the tone, the attitude that the speaker has toward the audience and the subject. Tone always equals meaning. If you're ever confused by looking at a speech or looking at a document, what's this supposed to mean? Always look at, does it feel angry? Does it feel like the author's angry? Does it feel like the author's happy? Does it feel like the author's concerned? This is going to lead us to what the piece actually means. So tone equals meaning. Make sure that you're paying attention to your tone. Again, this is a really relaxed tone that I have with you right now. I'm not super formal. So there you go. There is a model speech that'll be linked on the content page that you can take a look at, which is always beneficial. Also, TED Talks. If you look up any TED Talk at all, you'll see that those are very rarely super formal. The TED Style Guide, and there is a TED Style Guide, dictates they don't want you to be super formal. You shouldn't walk up there like you are presenting um, data, right? Or like you're presenting a study that took years and years to do. You're just talking, and you're talking about things that you've experienced, and you're talking about things that you found, and you're talking about your life and whatever you brought to the table to talk about. So it doesn't have to be super formal. We pay attention when we're talking in a conversational style. We pay attention to our contractions. Am Is it going to offend people or seem weird if I say don't instead of do not? Again, I'm saying don't here, so we're good. But if I was in a super formal setting, I firstly wouldn't say super formal. I would say, if I am in an extremely formal setting, I would not use the word don't. I would use the word do not instead, or shan't, as it were, because you're trying to avoid contractions, right? Things that kind of deformalize or informalize the speech a little bit. You're going to avoid making references to things like cultural references, references to movies, things like that. And you're going to also avoid fragments. In a formal style, everything kind of has to be a complete sentence. In a conversational style, you can, stop a sentence like that and it makes sense. So you just have to pay attention to what style and what level of formality you want to have. Your journal in your unit 2 doc will talk about public speaking, not public writing. So make sure that you do that as well, looking at different styles of formality and when you need to have them. When we use a narrative in a story, we need to ask some questions first. And again, if the answer is no to some of these questions, you may not want to include the story. You may want to switch to a different story. You may just want to skip using a narrative altogether. You don't have to every time you're speaking to a group of people. But am I familiar with the story? Have you ever tried to tell a joke that you heard and then don't remember? It's the worst because then you start the joke. You're like, okay, so a whale walks into a cafe. No, okay, it wasn't a whale. It was a walrus. A walrus walks into no, it wasn't a cafe. It was a coffee shop. Or as long as you're familiar with the story, you'll be all right. Does it resonate with me? Does it resonate with the audience and does it resonate with the speaker, right? Do I understand why I'm saying it? And will that translate and can I make it translate to the audience? So, resonate meaning like will it hit them where it's supposed to, right? Will it offend them? I was at a conference this summer of teachers. It was an education tech conference. It's one of the ones I present at and go to every year, and it was the first time in a few years that it happened, and it was really great to see everyone again. And we had the speaker and she was amazing, but she cursed, and I wasn't offended because obscene language, like I when I'm not talking to you, I have like r-rated language in like my own personal life, so it didn't offend me, but you could tell it turned some of the people in the audience off. And so you have to know, like, okay, will this offend the audience? What is the audience? You got to do a little bit of thinking ahead of who the audience is and will it offend them, and does it fit in the time that I have? So often, you just don't have the time to tell a 10-minute long story, right? So you have to keep it short. I've got a maximum 30 minutes here. I try to shoot for 20, so you got to keep it as short as you can. In most cases, your audience is going to be various people. Now, again, for the purposes of this class, your audience is me and me alone. And you know that I'm not super offended, and you know that I'm pretty lenient. So, you know me, you can ask me any questions you ever want. If you're asking about the audience, aka me, you can totally ask any questions at any time, and I will be honest with you and give you straight up audience analysis of whatever you need. But in most cases, you're going to want to consider the age of the audience. I'm going to give this lesson a whole lot differently to seventh graders than I do to you, or to elementary school students than I do to you. We're going to make it shorter. We're going to have activities built in. It's going to be a whole lot easier to get through. Gender, does it matter, right? Are we predominantly male, female, non-binary? What is the gender makeup there? And again, does what you're saying matter in that case? And then prior knowledge. What do they already know possibly about the subject that you're giving them? What do they already know that you don't necessarily have to do? And then the conditions. Do you have a microphone? Does the microphone work? Are you going to have to yell? Do you have visual aids? Do you need visual aids? Will the room be loud? Will there be other stuff going on in the room at the time? All of these are things to consider when you are speaking to any audience, but also in what stories, what narratives to tell. Let's take a look at this ad for an adoption center real quick. This is an example of using stories to persuade someone to do something. So we switched POV here to help connect with potential adopters. There's also a Ben Affleck speech linked in the Unit 2 document that talks about there's a really good example of using an anecdote, a story to persuade people. But look at this. This is from the perspective of the cat, Aspen. I am a 2-year-old male white domestic short hair cat. I am a one of a kind. I have a partial tail. I love to share my uniqueness with you in making, if you leave a message, if you're interested in making me your next best friend. So we're changing the point of view. We're using a little bit of a story to help persuade here. Again, You shouldn't be nervous giving speeches in this class because you're just giving them to me. Okay. But if you do get nervous in public settings, 3 out of 4 people do. 75% of people, when surveyed, said that they had some sort of public speaking anxiety. Jerry Seinfeld had the classic joke that the number one fear that people had was public speaking. The number two fear was death. That means at a funeral, most people would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. But it's true. People get super nervous in public speaking situations because of all of the unknowns, right? They ask those what ifs of like, what if they don't like me? What if I fumble over my words? What if I trip getting up there? What if the microphone doesn't work? What if I start sweating? What if they see me start sweating? What Those can kill you. Those can cripple you in anything you do in life. Those what ifs can just absolutely beat you down. What helps get past those? Preparing, outlining, drafting, practice, going through it in your head. Spoiler alert, I practiced this to you in my head this morning in the shower. I said, okay, I'm going to talk. I got to give this unit 2 thing. It's about narrative. So let's go through some of the things I remember that are in there so I can talk about it. What are some things that I know I will try to cover? What are some things that I've just made up on the spot, right? The more you think about a speech or any sort of public speaking scenario ahead of time, the easier it's going to be for you. There is a quiz about managing nerves, 2.06 quiz. Make sure that you go in and do it. For your Unit 2 narrative speech assignment, it's going to be on Flipgrid if we're still using Flipgrid whenever you see this. You will develop and deliver a retelling of a narrative. You will be responsible for covering certain content and demonstrating specific speaking skills you've learned in this unit. Your speech must be between 3 and 5 minutes. Just make it no longer than 5. Ain't nobody got time for that. The content to cover in your speech includes a retelling of the narrative's plot, beginning, middle, and end, integration into the plot of the narrative's characters, the narrative's theme that as it relates to your audience. You will have good eye contact, volume, pacing. So again, you're going to take a story that you've heard and you're going to retell it. Make sure that you're covering everything effectively. If you don't hit all of these things, I'll let you know and you can redo it, or we can talk about what you missed and get better for next time. Okay, that is all I've got. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please reach out. You can leave a comment down below or email me always. 17 minutes, sub 20. Pretty darn good. Good luck on Unit 2, and I'll see you again in Unit 3.